Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Fatal Attraction Part 8. This is the tragic life of Travis Alexander. On June 10th, 2008, the police would actually get a random phone call from Jodi Arias herself. And she would call the police and say that she had not heard from Travis in a couple of days and was starting to become increasingly worried. She would even tell the police that she possibly had heard that something had happened to him or that he had actually been killed. And without being questioned, she would immediately tell the police that her and Travis had actually dated prior and that she would ultimately leave the relationship because she would catch Travis cheating on her. She would go further and tell the police that even after the breakup, the two would reconcile and had been more so friends with benefits. She would further go without being questioned and say that she had not seen him since April 3rd, but the last time that she had spoken to Travis was on June the 3rd. And she would further go and tell the police that he had actually been working out a lot and did not know anyone that could overpower him. The police would quickly ask Jodi several questions and would begin questioning her about the stalking and a lot of the different things that the Hughes had actually informed the police about the relationship between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. And to this question, Jodi would actually laugh it off and tell the police that after she had caught Travis cheating on her, that when they would try to rekindle the relationship, that they would give each other their passwords to their social media as a way to establish trust between each other. But would also say that Travis would eventually say this isn't working, and they would both change their passwords to being a different password so they could not hack on each other's accounts. The police would then, after being told this, would ask Jodi, well then why is it when we ask if there's anyone who would want to hurt Travis Alexander, your name was the first one to pop up? To this question, Jodi would just very simply tell the police that she was the ex-girlfriend, and after she had caught Travis cheating on her, they would try to rekindle the relationship, but it was always constant arguing and fighting. And eventually she would say that when she had tried to hack into Travis's cell phone to see if that he was cheating on her, it would eventually just come to a head and they would just go their separate ways. But she would completely ignore the fact that the police had information about not only the hacking, but the stalking. And she would not even have information about the stalking. And after this, the police and Jodi would end their conversation. And after getting off the phone with Jodi Arias, the police would at that point make Jodi Arias their primary suspect. And they would talk amongst each other. And then the thing that really stuck out to them the most was the fact that Jodi was so confident that she was not a primary suspect, or that the police were onto Jodi as well. But the police would later say they would use that to their advantage. Shortly after the phone call, Jodi Arias would actually make an appointment to go to the police station to give an alibi on June 2nd, 2008. And at the time, her alibi seemed pretty watertight. She would tell the police that on June 2nd, she had made plans to drive to Utah for a prepaid legal conference and had asked a fellow friend of hers if she could stay the night while she went to Utah. But she would also tell the police that she would get lost on the way and would not arrive at this friend's house till a day later. And once she arrived at the house, she would stay the night and attend the prepaid legal conference and return home. And when the police had done an investigation with her friend, Ryan Burns, he would actually confirm that she had in fact stayed the night at his house. But even though her alibi seemed pretty watertight, DNA and forensics would tell a completely different story. If you remember, we had talked about police finding a shell casing embedded in a puddle of blood. And also embedded in the puddle of blood would also be a couple hair fibers. And the police would take these hair fibers and do some forensic testings, and they would be a complete match for Jodi Arias. Now, if you remember, we had talked about how police had found a camera inside the washing machine of Travis Alexander's house when they were investigating the crime. And they had theorized that whoever had this camera had probably tried to destroy the camera as a way to destroy evidence. And this would prove to be spot on, as whoever had the camera before the cops had found it had tried to delete all the photos. And even though the camera was damaged beyond repair, the memory card inside of that camera would actually be completely intact. And the technician team would recover this and recover all the photos. And the technician team would find on this camera, as it was all time-stamped on June the 4th, 2008, between the times of 5 and 5:30 p.m. And it is shown on June the 4th, 2008, that Jodi Arias had in fact been with Travis Alexander. And she would arrive at his house and the two would engage in having sex. And the police would know this because they would actually take explicit pictures of each other while having sex. There would also be photos of Travis Alexander in the shower and taking various poses in the shower. And this, I might add, is probably the last known photo of Travis Alexander that was taken moments before his murder. The next series of photos that the police would recover from the camera on that same day would be much more grim. It's not sure how, but it's possible the camera was put on an automated picture taking mode, and it is seen in one photo taking a photo of Travis lying on the bathroom floor as he's bleeding to death. And in the background, you can see the foot of Jodi Arias. And another photo would actually be taken where it would have Travis Alexander lying in his bedroom as Jodi was standing over his body. And the next following photo would have a picture of Jodi actually dragging his body into the shower. And after this, the evidence against Jodi Arias would be irrefutable, and the police would actually put an indictment on Jodi Arias in early July of 2008. The police would arrive at the home of Jodi Arias' grandparents on July 15th, 2008. And lucky for them, they would realize that Jodi Arias was a potential flight risk. As they arrived at the residence, they would see that everything that Jodi had in her room would be completely packed in their car, and had realized that she was making plans at that point of fleeing the area. As the police would arrest Jodi for the murder of Travis Alexander, the police would also question her grandparents. Her grandfather would give the police some pretty interesting information and would say that he had prior called the police to report his house being robbed on May 28, 2008. He would say that not much of significance would actually be stolen at his residence, a couple CD players and some DVD players, but he would tell the police that one specific thing was stolen that held a lot of significance, and it would be his .25 caliber pistol. And to this day, it's never been recovered. And Jodi's grandparents would not be the only ones that police would investigate. They would then begin questioning all of Jodi Arias' ex-boyfriends, and they all actually had something to say. They would first contact her ex-boyfriend Daryl Brewer, who would tell the police that on June the 2nd, 2008, she would actually make a phone call to him and tell him that she was going to a prepaid legal conference in Utah and would ask to borrow a couple gas cans as she didn't want to spend too much money on gas driving to Utah. Jodi would then call ex-boyfriend Ryan Burns and tell him the exact same story, that she was going to a prepaid legal conference in Utah and was wanting to know if she could stay the night at his house that night. And Ryan Burns would say that he had no problem with it. And on the same day, Jodi would call a car rental agency that resided in Bedding, California, and she would rent a white car. And it's around this time that Jodi began making her plans to driving to Travis Alexander's house on June the 4th, 2008.